welcome to you all and thank you for your attendance. My name is Cindy Gordon. I'm the project coordinator for the Canadian Hard of Hearing Association Edmonton branch. We have several of our board and some members here, but the person who has spearheaded this project is Lee Ramsdell, who's just standing here coming back to his seat, our president of CHHA-ED. We are pleased to be working once again in the partnership of the City of Edmonton and with whom we've built a very solid foundation. We're happy that we're with them and growing and ensuring that all of our city buildings are accessible. Thanks again to the Rick Hanson Foundation, as you'll notice the banners around, for their support of this project. We have an ambassador that will be speaking in a few minutes from that project. CHHA-ED is actually part of a national organization. We've been in Edmonton for approximately 20 years that we've been quite active. So if you haven't met me, I don't know why, because I've been around with you all for that long. But hearing loss, as you know, is the #1 disability. And it is actually the #1 disability that isn't getting a lot of action. You know, we're the invisible disability, so this is something we need to really change and start to be visible and start to get our needs and concerns out there. So this is why we've done this project. It's why we do all the projects that we do, is because we understand where our members are coming from. Most of us live it, and we want to ensure that we don't have to live without theater or without activities, without going to workshops, and we'll be able to hear. So that's why we're here today. So I'm going to, first off, play a message that has come from Rick Hanson himself, welcoming you in our project.
Hi, I'm Rick Hanson. Welcome to this special Access for All Canada 150 awareness event. This is an exciting opportunity for all of us to come together to acknowledge and celebrate the great work that's been done to improve accessibility for your friends, neighbors, and community members with disabilities. Did you know that nearly 4 million Canadian adults have some form of mobility, vision, or hearing disability? That's 1 in 7 Canadians, and that number is expected to more than double by 2036. As you know, one of the greatest barriers that people with disabilities still face are physical barriers in the built environment. You know, the places where we live, work, learn, and play. Not having access to these common places and spaces means that people with disabilities aren't able to fully participate in life, and our society can't fully benefit from the talents of people with disabilities either. And that's why the Rick Hanson Foundation is leaving a present for Canada's 150th birthday. With the support of the Government of Canada and communities like yours, we're breaking down barriers with the Access for All Canada 150 Signature Project. Access for All has funded 55 incredible barrier buster projects right across this entire country to improve accessibility and inclusion in schools, libraries, churches, theaters, and recreation centers. These projects are removing physical barriers and helping create awareness about the importance of accessibility all across our great nation. So congratulations to the team of barrier busters who worked so hard to make this project happen. Your commitment and dedication to increasing accessibility and inclusion has brought us one step closer to a Canada that's accessible for all. Thank you, and keep up the great work, and let's never ever give up on the dream.
So we are one of the 55 projects that got chosen across Canada for this 150 special year. So we're very proud to have been chosen and have provided access in this facility at City Hall. So we have a loop around this room. I encourage all of you, because I'm assuming most of you are hearing, to try out the loop system. The installer, Paul, is gladly to bring one of them around. You can see what it's like for us and why this equipment is so important. So please feel free to use them. And right now I'd like to introduce Shauna Paisley-Cooper, who is from the Rick Hanson Foundation. In 2008, Shauna fell off her mountain bike and broke her neck, leaving her complete C6 quadriplegia. Shauna spent 5.5 months in the hospital. Coming home to a new home, not by choice, was devastating. Shauna had to figure out how to be a mom, wife, and friend, paralyzed and from a wheelchair. She felt that her dreams were shattered and suffered depression for 1.5 years after returning home from her family. After beating her depression, she has not looked back. Shauna is a stay-at-home soccer mom, driving the girls to and from school, volunteering in the classrooms for their home reading program, on the fundraiser committee for the school playground, coaching the girls' soccer teams. She speaks to newly injured patients at the Glenrose. She enjoys hand cycling, kayaking, and camping with her family. She believes in giving back to her community and volunteers with the Adapted Adventure Sports Program. So welcome, Shauna.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shauna, and I'm here on behalf of the Rick Hanson Foundation. I am an ambassador for the foundation, so I do speak on their behalf at various community events, and I do support the foundation. I do have a personal connection with Rick, as we both have a spinal cord injury. When I was in the hospital, I received a personal phone call from Rick, and he gave me hope and inspiration that life on the other side of a traumatic disability was going to be okay, and that there was still lots to do and that great things were going to happen. In honor of the 30th anniversary of the Rick Hanson Man in Motion World Tour and Canada's 150th birthday, the Rick Hanson Foundation is bringing together communities across Canada, just like this one, to take on a barrier buster project. The Canadian Hard of Hearing Association is a successful recipient of a barrier buster grant. Here are some details about their project. They have installed audio frequency induction loop systems into the Heritage Room, the River Room, and Council Chambers. Canadian Hard of Hearing Association Edmonton has attended many hearing conferences and worked with various professional organizations and individuals, and have investigated all assisted listening technologies and have determined that the audio frequency induction loop system is the only system that gives us speech intelligibility. On behalf of the Rick Hanson Foundation, congratulations to the Canadian Hard of Hearing Association Edmonton for your great work.
Thank you very much. We're going to jump right into our presentation with Dr. Juliette Sterkens. Hurry up and chew that and swallow it. All the way from Oshkosh, Wisconsin, Juliette was an audiologist with 30 years of experience in the fitting of hearing instruments and counseling on living well with hearing loss. Her retired engineer husband installed over 50 loops locally to the benefit of her hard of hearing patients. She has become heavily involved in the national advocacy campaign for wider use of hearing loops, and for this purpose maintains an informational website, which she will share with you later. In 2011, she won the Hearing Loss Association Technology Access Award and Wisconsin's Audiologist of the Year. In 2013, she won the Academy of Audiology Lead Doppler Award, and she's won many others. Obviously, I missed 100 over there, but she'll show you. As of June 1st, though, in 2014, she retired officially from her private practice to devote all of her time, and I mean all of it because this is what she does, promoting the loops. Her focus is on education of consumers, audiologists, hearing healthcare professionals, clergy, and AV professionals. We had a wonderful session before for the public, and she encouraged and enthused everybody. I've heard her speak many times, and every time I'm more encouraged. So welcome, Juliette, to Edmonton and to the podium.
Thank you. And I really appreciate you being here. And just as a disclosure, I receive grant funding from a private family foundation that pays my outreach. Any of you ever heard me speak before? The audiologist? You have. Where? No kidding. Were you a student there? Oh, wow. And actually, I've really tried to make an effort to speak to AUD programs. I would like to get to the students before the hearing aid industry gets to them. Well, I hope you learned something new. It's been a while, right? Yeah, very cool. How many of you are audiologists in the room? Okay, if you hold your hand up, she'll give you a packet of information with all kinds of handouts and reprints, articles from audiology practitioner from the ADA organization, and hopefully some materials that you find helpful when you work to educate your patients. I'm a firm believer you got to have something in your hand, you know. You may not have heard of Dr. David Myers. He's a college professor. But if you've studied psychology, there's a pretty good chance that you read his book, Introduction to Psychology. His book has been used by over 11 million students, sold 5 million times, translated in like, I don't know, 10 or 14 languages. It's used in China, it's used in France, it's used in Germany. But this gentleman has progressive low-frequency hearing loss. Runs in the family. His mom died deaf, never got an implant. And Dave was wearing his second set of hearing aids that he really didn't want to have, but he had to give up teaching, couldn't hear in the classroom anymore at Hope College. And he and his wife are at Ione Abbey in Scotland, and his wife points at a hearing loop logo on the wall, and Dave turns on his telecoil. And he has this incredible moment at Ione Abbey where suddenly this voice from the minister just, you know, arrived in his ears, pure, clear sound. He was able to understand, you know, because the sound at Ione Abbey bounces off all these walls. And it was just incredible, an experience. Now, Dave is a social psychologist. And so he went back to Holland, Michigan, and I'm from the Netherlands. There's got to be a connection there. I moved here from the Netherlands. It'll be 36 years ago in October. I moved to the United States. I will not say a whole lot more about that, but now at this point I wonder what I ever did. And Dave wanted to change how hearing access was done in Holland, Michigan. And would you believe that within a couple of years, and with a little help of some very well-heeled friends, he'd been able to loop hundreds of facilities in Holland, Zealand, Grand Rapids area, including the Grand Rapids Airport, by the way. And then, this is in the early 2000s, okay? So this is a while ago, right? And so then Dave is a gifted writer, and he started writing articles and letters and hearing review, hearing journal, hearing loss magazine, giving presentations around the country. I heard him in 2008. And I'm in this room with all kinds of hard of hearing people. I'm the only audiologist in the room. I'm in the back, and there's people in the room having their hearing loop moment. They just can't believe how well they can hear in the loop in the library in Menominee, Wisconsin. And I'm in the back going, oh, the missing link for my patients, you know? And I have stood on my head in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and I can't get my patients to pick up FM devices, and they won't buy FM systems. How many of you sell FM systems regularly? And the answer is, not very much. One. I mean, and I tell you, I tried my darndest, okay? I'm hearing Dave speak, and I'm going, oh, the missing link in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Well, what happened then is we hopped on a tandem bike, and my husband on the bike is saying, well, you know, I could become your loop installer if you let me retire. And literally, we started this, you know, he retires, and we advocate for hearing loops, and we can do it. If Dave can do it in Holland, Michigan, I can do it in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, right? And we literally set out, by the way, Oshkosh is right there. It's about an hour south of Green Bay. And about a year and a half into my advocacy, this is my husband crawling through churches and basements. He's an engineer and just going out of his way to help my patients. And I'll tell you why he did that. The very first church we looped, it's Calvary Lutheran, and one of my patients offered to loop the church with the memorial money of her husband. And we both cried. You know, her husband had just died long. But anyway, and the loop gets installed, and we do a hearing loop dedication service. And in walks Russ, and Russ is my patient, who's wearing a 380p power cross. Anybody know what a 380p power cross is? It's an Oticon, and you can practically hear yourself talk in his ear with a microphone on the other ear. Otherwise, there's too much feedback. It's either that or a body aid, a P11P, right? Russ sits in front of me, and his daughter looks at me and go, yeah, he can push the button. Russ switches the button, and this is Russ. Whoa! I can really hear now in the church. And Russ turns around and goes, I look at my husband is crying. It's like, man, if I can make Russ hear, I can make anybody hear, right? Literally, from then on, I send my patients to Calvary Lutheran, and I said, you got to go try the loop. But I'm not Lutheran. I don't care. And I'm that kind of audiologist. It's very obnoxious, that's just who I am. It's very Dutch, by the way. Any Dutch people in the room? So you recognize this personality, right? I sent them to Calvary Lutheran. They would come back going, I could hear the minister lick his lips. And so when you have that kind of information, you want to share it with the rest of the world, right? So today, in Wisconsin, we are over 628 or somewhere in that neighborhood, over 300 churches. But the real reason this is happening is because of all these professionals. And I'll tell you the truth. I didn't realize how poorly my patients were hearing with the hearing aids I so carefully fit and verified with a VeriFit. I thought I was doing them a favor when I upgraded them to new technology, but it wasn't until I started looping that they went over the top, excited. Maybe not as excited as I am, but they were pretty excited. And so then I spent time educating professionals in Wisconsin. I did a lot of presentations. I was also past president of the Wisconsin Alliance of Hearing Aid Professionals, so there was dealers and audiologists, multiple presentations, and these professionals and many more are taking the time to educate their patients. And that's how this information is moving forward. So I can't thank you enough for being here, because that's how that information gets out there. That kind of has made me think why people don't buy hearing aids. And my thought, and that's just my thinking, but this is Ruth Bentler. I'm sure you all recognize Ruth from the University of Iowa, who was asked on a PBS program with Charlie Rose. Charlie Rose wears hearing aids, by the way. Why don't people buy hearing aids? Ruth just very calmly says, well, part vanity, part financial, because hearing aids are expensive, right? But mostly due to the fact that hearing aids fail to satisfy their expectations for the situations that prompted them to seek help for their hearing loss in the first place. In other words, hearing aids don't deliver in the places where they need to hear the most. Could that be the reason? A lot of people don't buy hearing aids, don't get hearing aids. They hear from their friends hearing aids don't work. And we are all out there saying, but hearing aids work, but they don't work in the places where they need them the most. That's why maybe they're not getting them. And yes, cost is an issue. And no, they don't want to be seen with hearing aids behind their ears. But could that be part of the reason? So I'm not the only one. This is a study by Sergei Kachkin. It's 2012, who shows hearing aid handicap improvement in these different situations. And they are given options to say, I'm very satisfied with my hearing aids in quiet. 70% say I'm very satisfied or satisfied. But no, it does not include people who say I am somewhat satisfied with my hearing aids. We drive a BMW. My dealer will not accept anything but a 9 or a 10 rating on a satisfaction rating. So if somebody says, oh, I'm somewhat satisfied with my hearing aids, that's not happy. That's not satisfied, right? So Sergey stipulates here, places of worship. Hearing aids really only improve hearing handicap 56%. Large public lectures, 52%. Watching TV. How many of you fit TV devices with hearing aids? And do your patients love them? Sometimes they say, if it wasn't for this little TV Dex thing, my old hearing aids were almost as good as my new ones, but I love that TV thing, right? Because TV is a huge issue for our patients. This is not your fault. The hearing aids have limitations. There's people in this room who wear hearing aids and who will tell you it's very difficult going through life wearing microphones on ears. So why the dissatisfaction? I mean, you could give this slide, I don't have to tell you that. But hearing aids at best correct for loss of audibility 50%, at best. If you have a 50 dB loss, you have an aided hearing threshold of 25. You got a 70 dB loss. You're lucky if it's 35. But how many times do you see people with losses 80, 90 decibels? They don't correct for auditory processing. How many of you do quick-syn testing? Cool. What's a good quick-syn score? Yes. What's a bad quick-syn score? Oh my God, no. But you get a quick-syn score of 10 or 15, you kind of go, oh my God, you know? Do you do a BKB? You know what that is? It's a kindergarten version of the quick-syn. And you know what's nice about the BKB? The guy says, ready? They are looking at the clock. Ready? I'm walking to school. Ready? It's a guy. He gives a carrier sentence, he speaks slowly, and he speaks short sentences. So it's a great counseling tool, by the way. But if you have a poor processing, was measured with a quick-syn, you understand that new hearing aids aren't going to make Hazel hear like she did when she was 25, right? And then hearing aids really only improve the directionality, the SNR improvement of a directional microphone at best, 3 to 5 dB. Do you know what it depends on? Oh, you didn't know you were going to be called on this. Oh, God. Okay, so what does it depend on? Improvement. Whether the ear molds are occluded, right? It also depends on where the noise is coming from. The noise has to be behind you, and do you know how close the noise has to be? 3 to 6 feet. Any noise that comes beyond 10 feet, the directionality improvement of a directional microphone is less, because noise really comes from all around, but the hearing aids are only reducing noise from behind. So if you have Hazel, who has a quick-syn score of 10, hanging new hearing aids on Hazel will not improve her ability to hear in background of noise. And that's not a hearing aid issue. The hearing aid industry wants you to believe that you got to hang those Oticon open hearing aids on her and everything will be hunky-dory. It won't. And it's not your fault. It's her inability to process speech under poor signal-to-noise ratio issues. And of course, the biggest issue is that our clients hear the world through microphones. And microphones pick up what's loudest, what's closest, and they don't know what sounds are important. Really, the only way that you can then improve signal-to-noise ratio for Hazel is wireless mic. Okay? Use a mini mic, but only works for one person at a time. Somebody just brought it up that his dad has a wireless mic, but what do they do when there's 5 people in the room? You move closer, because the closer you get, the greater the improvement in signal-to-noise ratio, or you use an assistive listening system, an FM system. Those are the only 3 solutions to save Hazel in effect. And Hazel's quick-syn score is 15. Past the first sentence, this woman practically falls off the map. FM and infrared systems do improve the signal-to-noise ratio, but they're not hearing aid compatible. So the big difference with a loop system is that it is directly compatible with the hearing aid as long as the hearing aid has a T-coil. So if the Hazel turns on her T-coil in church, she suddenly hears that minister at a signal-to-noise ratio improvement of over 25 because she wears occluding ear molds. In the hearing loop, and by the way, you're all sitting in one right now, my voice from the microphone gets picked up by the loop amplifier. It's sending a signal through the wire or through an array. Usually it's an array of wires. And the telecoil in the hearing aid picks that up. So rather than transfer of acoustic sound, it's transfer via magnetic sound from the hearing loop. And so what's happening is that this microphone becomes the hearing aid to the microphone. You might as well put your ear, you're using the loop here in the room, but she is, the lady behind you is. No, but you don't wear hearing aids. It's as if she's 8 inches away from my mouth. And let me tell you what happens with a microphone when I take it away. All right? So we tend to think that microphones are just absolutely wonderful, but hearing aids have major limitations. The microphones on hearing aids really only effectively work 6 feet. That doesn't mean they can't hear the wife talking from the kitchen, but they can't understand her. And here's what you get. This huge signal-to-noise ratio improvement. This is for open fits, this is for closed fits. And so for the more hearing loss there is, the greater the signal-to-noise ratio improvement. There are several studies that demonstrate this. Not a lot of studies out there, by the way. This was published in the Hearing Review in 2014, written up by Sergei Kachkin and a whole group of well-known audiologists. And I queried, in the end, almost 900 hearing aid users, and they rated their performance on a 1 to 10 scale, where 1 means I hear nothing, and 10 means I heard every word. And my patients kept telling me, I can hear every word in church. So I used that phrasing. The average non-looped response was 4.9. In the loop, it improved to 8.7. By the way, that's very much like that hearing handicap improvement from Sergei Kachkin from his studies from Market Track that says 52% in an auditorium. Here is a card. I pass these around to audiologists in the community in the Fox Valley area. And one of the first cards that came back, this is anonymous. Have I used hearing aids in a loop? Yes. Where did I use it? St. Rafe's, which happens to be my church, and it had a temporary loop at that time. How well did you hear using your hearing aids, no T-coil? And on the scale from 1 to 10, this person rated the hearing out of the loop a 2, in the loop a 9. I made a copy of that card and I slipped it under Father Doug's door. Father Doug, you got to see this. He said, I already know, because people would come up to him and tell him how much of a difference the hearing loop made. And you see it right there. So then I did a second survey among HLAA members. This is a banquet in Washington, D.C. There were about 630 attendees. That whole place was looped, and you can see the tape, the gaffer's tape on the floor. It has a huge phased array. The sound in that auditorium was pristine to my normal ears. Pristine, right? Of the 630 people, 300 used a loop, and they were asked to rate effort. So, how much effort does it take to hear out of the loop versus in the loop? Out of the loop, the listening effort was a 6.9, and in the loop, the effort rating dropped to a 1.9. So they can sit back and laugh. There's a comedian, there was a magician who was absolutely amazing, who walked through the audience, and I could tell that people were no longer looking at the captions. They were looking at the magician, because in the meantime, they could hear this good man right in their hearing aids. Here's the data. This is out of the loop effort rating. So there were about 32% who said it's not very difficult to hear out of the loop. They rated their hearing ability a 1, a 2, or a 3, meaning no effort out of the loop. But look what happens in the loop. 90% rate their ability to hear in the loop a 1, a 2, or a 3. So if you hear with less effort, you can laugh, you can process, you can understand, you can sit back. It doesn't take as much computing power to hear. And I move in circles with people who are very hard of hearing, and they tell me, I'm tired. I need to go to bed. I've done all the listening I can handle today. These are the comments that I get from consumers, and these are the consumers that we see every day. What's amazing, these are people who are very hard of hearing. These are NAIDA users, these are E38P users, and there's still people using those linear power hearing aids, by the way. I can hear well without a loop, but the loop makes it so much clearer. The loop makes a world of difference. Amazed. These are the hardest of hearingist folks that are walking around at this convention, and they're just blown away by it. And then my patients started sending me letters like this. And I gotta tell you this. This gal, Barbara Hill, she said, the loop in my church isn't working. I said, that loop is working, because I know, because I tested it. She said, it's just loud. I said, I'll meet you sometime in your church and we'll try it out. So she's sitting in the big church. She's sitting in the church. My husband's talking at the altar, and I'm with her, and I say, okay, turn on your T-coil. And I hear her go, beep, 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 beep. Anybody know what make hearing aid that is and what she just did? That's a Widex hearing aid, and that's a volume control. She turned the volume full on. I said, Barb, you're on the wrong. So I turn her hearing aid off, turn it back on. I said, now you got to feel the button. It's that soft button, not that hard, pointy button. You got to be lower, and your hearing aid will go beep, beep, right? And so I can hear it go, because when you push hard enough, you hear it? You hear it beep? Oh, I can hear it, of course, because I got my hearing aid in. Barb starts to bawl. The grief just poured out of that woman. She just couldn't believe. And then she sent me that letter. My patients never sent me letters about hearing aids until I started looping. This kind of stuff, it blew me away. That doesn't mean they don't need good hearing aids. They still need good hearing aids. But in the places where hearing aids don't deliver, they need more, and they need a loop, preferably over any other technology. And then this is a teenager, a mom of a teenager, who sent me this message, yay, 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 they put a loop in her in the TV room, and it blew her daughter away. It's on video. If you Google parent testimonial on YouTube, some of that stuff is online. It's just absolutely lovely. Just to give you a quick rundown of where loops can be used, they can be used at ticket counters, airports. If you go to Ireland, all the gates at the Ireland New Airport are all looped. It's happening now in airports like at Detroit. I know big airports in the US are looking at installing loops, but you can even have a loop in a tour bus. Reception desks, they shine in churches because they use, of course, good PA systems. This Michigan State Auditorium is used for graduations. All 14,000, whatever, 12,000 of the 14,000 seats are looped. And this is a taxi cab in New York City. I will admit, I had to look at about 3,000 of them, I swear, until I found the loop that was, or a taxi that was looped. All the new taxis will have this system installed. But if you go to London, and there's 2 people here with connections to the UK, they will tell you that the London cabs are looped. Here's another application. This is a grocery store, and your question should be, where's the microphone? Right there. And it works really slick. This is the loop, and the loop creates a bubble in front of that loop that only extends a couple of feet. So you don't have to worry that if there were another loop at the next counter that would be an issue. There's not a lot of bleed over. They can work pretty effectively. I don't know if you're a member of the American Academy. You probably aren't. Why would you? You're in Canada. But I wrote this article, Roadmap to a Looped Community, and I'm going to give you a quick rundown of how this can be done. That's really the reason why CHHA is so grateful that you're here, because you can help make this happen in the Edmonton area. So in your packet of handouts is this article written by Dr. Lopez and Dr. Cacavo. She's a past president of the the Academy of Doctors of Audiology. They wrote a really quick, easy read, how to loop your community. So in a nutshell, you need to have T-coil equipped hearing aids, obviously. And when I started looping, 90% of my patients had T-coils in their hearing aids. So it was pretty easy at that time to just activate Telecoils. You want to have a loop in your office, and there are installers in this room who are willing to do that, really for very reasonable cost, give you the tools so you can demonstrate, you can also verify that the T-coil is working. And that reminds me, how many of you use like a VeriFit? Oh, cool, because there's an absolute coolest little quickie test in a VeriFit, how to verify a T-coil. I apologize, this is my US slide. I talk about educating clients on the ADA, on their rights. I mean, there's somebody in the room here in a wheelchair, right? I mean, she could not get into this building unless there was a wheelchair ramp and an elevator and a bathroom big enough so that she can move around. Our clients really deserve that same kind of accommodation. And then I have some suggestions on how to become an advocate. So you need hearing aids with T-coils. These T-coils preferably should be oriented vertically. Why? Because if the hearing loop is of the simple perimeter kind, and you bend your head, or the T-coil is horizontally located, it won't pick up a strong signal. It needs to be a vertical signal. Most European hearing aids, so all the Phonak, Oticon, Siemens, Resound devices have good telecoils. Starkey's telecoils, some of them are horizontally located. Do any of you work with cochlear implants? The N6s from Cochlear have a horizontal T-coil. But in the N7, it's been corrected. So that's been wonderful. Now, I didn't know all this. If you think I knew this when I started advocating for hearing loops and telecoils, the answer is no. I just thought all a patient needed was a T-coil, right? And life would be hunky-dory. You've got a patient with a 50 decibel hearing loss. You have verified with Real Ear that the hearing aid is providing appropriate gain for soft, medium, and loud sounds. You're not exceeding their tolerance level, and let's say it provides 23 dB of gain. In effect, you want the telecoil to provide the same response with a similar magnetic input. It's called transparency. I didn't know that. But a lot of European hearing aids, when you switch from M to T, the hearing aid does just that. But not all of them, and that's why it's good to do a quickie verify. So in the VeriFit, after you've done the program, you can run a frequency response on the hearing aid with a 65 dB in, and then you open the box, you hold the hearing aid above the loop, you click Teleloop, you run a speech map for T-coil testing, I think it's called, and it runs a similar response with a magnetic input, and if the two overlap, you've got a magnetic T-coil, a transparent telecoil. That is known as the ANSI spliv test. I didn't know that either, but that's going to be in the new ANSI standard soon. And I really believe you need to give your patients instructions. You need to tell them, push the button, and you will hear 2 beeps. That's the program you need to use in the loop. Because we tell them stuff, and then I see them around the country, and they don't know what all these different programs are for in their hearing aids. I love talking hearing aids for that reason. But here's the VeriFit. Oh, it's called the speech map for T-coil testing. And basically, you open this box, put the hearing aid in, run a speech map for 65 dB in, then open up the test box, do it again, keep the box open, hold the hearing aid like it's worn on the ear. AudioScan has a little tutorial on that. It's easy. It takes 30 seconds. 30 seconds. It's quick. So you need to have a loop in your office. You need to be able to demonstrate quickly how this works. Works great for TVs in offices. to have some kind of sound put. Some offices put a microphone in the office so that the loop is connected to a mic and you can walk outside. It's like demonstrating an FM system, not any different. I also let the significant other try the loop. So the spouse, because they don't know what mom or dad or the spouse is missing. I give them a loop listening device with headphones, and then I made them listen to the loop signal, and you see them kind of go, oh, that is much better. That's a big difference. And then I turn the loop off and they go, oh, that is a big difference. So you have to just, take a couple of seconds to demonstrate that. Of course, I insisted that they would go and try a loop somewhere. And it's my Dutch personality that I didn't take no for an answer. Don't come back for your next appointment until you've been to Calvary Lutheran. In these handouts, this is the CHHA-ED handout, Get in the Hearing Loop brochure on the Telecoil. And I have in your handout a packet of different flyers that you can copy or put your business card on, and I have some other ones on my website. This is the handouts. Get more from hearing aids or implants in a hearing loop. And this one is the Telecoil and what the Telecoil can all be used. And this is a 2-pager, so there's front and back. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. The handouts are already there. These are advocacy cards that I have in different formats. In fact, there's an installer here who's got pretty nifty cards that is right on the card. My name is, and on this date, I had trouble hearing at your facility. May I recommend you install an induction hearing loop, then explaining why loops are so much better. And this is Mary Cacavo and Susan Lopez's office number. And then they would give a packet of information to who their patients loved handing these cards out. You're giving them permission to complain. You're telling them you're not going to hear everywhere, but there are solutions, and this is a really good one. But to get them, we need to do something to make this happen. Then I have this reprint, and I think there's ways that you can, it's geared towards the American market, but it has a ton of information on it. And so my patients would come back saying, I heard every word at Calvary Lutheran, how can I get this at St. Mary's? I'd say, take this handout to Father Doug or Father Mike. And then here's something else I did, which probably went way against HIPAA regulations in the US. I kept a binder. Within a year, I asked every patient, what do you like to do? I mean, what is it that, well, I watch my grandkids. I have trouble hearing my grandkids. I like watching TV. Do you do anything else outside the house? Well, yeah, I belong to Peace Lutheran. Do you go to the Grand Opera House? Yeah, I like to go, but I have trouble hearing at the Grand. And so I would tally where they went. Peace Lutheran, is it okay if I put your name under the P of Peace Lutheran? And if somebody wants to know if there's anybody else at Peace Lutheran who has trouble hearing, may I share your name? That's a HIPAA regulation. I should have had them sign waivers, but I didn't. This is a while ago. But so within a year, I know who went where. Rotary, Lions, Kiwanis, Grand Opera House, the different churches, Performing Arts Center, and I basically connected everybody. They would look over my shoulder and go, yo, John Smith wears hearing aids? I'm going to talk to him. We both have to talk to Father Mike and get that loop installed. So I was able to connect these people. And there were some churches, I saw 10 people. And if I saw 10, there must have been another 10 people I didn't see, right? There's other audiology offices in Oshkosh. So I identified places, I gave handouts, I spoke up, Rotary, Lions, Kiwanis, did a lot of public presentations. I have a Facebook group called Hearing Loop Advocates. I don't know if it's called Hearing Loop Advocates, but something with Hearing Loop. I'm sure it'll pop up. So if I see a fun article in the newspaper or on the web, I post it there, or I post it on Twitter. If you have a Facebook page, you can just share that on your Facebook page. I have a ton more information on that site. And I get probably every week an email from an audiologist in the US saying, I want to loop my church, but I don't know how to start. then you email me and I'll give you a whole list of suggestions, because I've done this a lot. And just it might be the one thing, that you figure out that works. These are some articles that you might find interesting. Linda Remmenschneider, wonderful audiologist in Chicago, has since retired, but we both wrote 2 articles for audiology practices. Maybe you find some good information there. I think together we can make this happen, and it means educating not only the consumers, not only the professionals, the AV guys, but then the audiologists as well. Email me, ask me questions, happy to help you. But I think we're going to quick move into our next part of the presentation, and then we'll get to a Q&A.
We do have a panel here of presenters that we're going to also introduce you to, and they have some information that is also very valuable for you to hear. And we have at my very far left, Leslie Tansey, who is filling in for Heather Crow, who was here earlier but was not very well and had to leave. And she was so gracious to stay the whole first part, and she was feeling awful. But Leslie has agreed to, and Leslie is with the City of Edmonton. She's been very, very involved with the accessibility issues. She plans all the events. She knows the issues. And she's going to give you a little bit of insight from that perspective. We have beside her David Flanagan, who is a technical supervisor of the Technical Advisors and Training, and he's a Building Safety Code Officer with the City of Edmonton as well. His carpentry and business background combined with codes knowledge serves a great team of inspectors, plan examiners, and support staff. More importantly, the public with technical advice and training. He is a loop advocate for us as well. Last but not least, Richard Hatfield. He's the current technical director at the Walter Darrell Theatre. He became the technical director with a team of 3 others in 2010. In 2013, the Edmonton Accessibilities Committee, which Leslie is also a part of, performed a review of the Walter Darrell Theatre, offered him suggestions on accessibility, and the Walter Darrell, true to heart, not only did the hearing, but they did for vision, they did for mobility. They really broke down the barriers. In the fall of 2014, him and his team installed 2 loops for the Walter Darrell, one at the box office, which makes it very easy to check in and ask questions, and the other in the auditorium. It is amazing. At the results of their efforts, his team at the Walter Darrell were honored with a number of recognitions, and he'll share that with you. But if someone like myself, who hasn't been to the Walter Darrell in years and years and used to be a seasoned member, went to the show and could actually hear it for the first time, it was an amazing experience. I'm one of those ones that would send those information like, wow, it's amazing. I can't express enough to you how beneficial they are to those of us with hearing loss. So I'm going to turn it over to the panel to share a few moments, and then it'll be open for questions.
Hi there. So when the Accessibilities Committee came and did the review at Walter Darrell, sure they talked about the physical stuff, but then they also made some recommendations for the hearing loss people. So at the time, we originally had, I think it was an IR system we had initially, and before I even became TD, it had gone into disrepair, so it was pretty much scrapped long before I became TD. Just a bit of history. I've been at Walter Darrell since 1991, so I've been there quite a while. Just got my Lifetime Achievement Award last year, so I guess they felt I was there long enough. When we were looking at the different hearing assist systems, I requested that they introduce us to someone, because the accessibilities people did have some contacts, and they brought in Lee and another fellow named Jim, and they came in and looked at our building. They did some electromagnetic interference testing, did some looking around in our space. We talked about the various options. Of course, IR, FM, and then we discussed the loop as well. After looking at all of the different options, it became pretty obvious to me that why in the hell would anyone even bother installing the other two? Because realistically, they are hearing assist systems that in a performance don't actually help someone with hearing loss. You have to wear a headset, and the headset literally just makes the stuff louder. Louder doesn't mean that you can tell the difference between wish, dish, and fish. After a bunch of research, when I was invited to go present at the Canadian Hard of Hearing meeting in one of the hospitals here at Glenrose. At that meeting, just ahead of me was the Citadel, who have an IR system. I think they're IR, aren't they? No, they're FM.
They have a system in McLeod.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about the old system. Yeah, the old system, I think it was IR.
Nobody knew where it was.
Their equipment also suffered from maintenance issues, as well as the people were just complaining about the simple fact that their system was junk and they were really having a hard time with it. I was sitting in the back going, oh crap, I forgot my Nomex underwear at home, because they were being flamed out of the room. I walked up, told the people who I was and the fact that I was going to install the loop in our theater, and it was like I turned over a check to each of them for $1 million. Literally, the room flipped. It was amazing to see. I'd never seen it before, and also kind of shocking because I was just some techno geek wanting to put extra bums in seats. At the time, that was basically my motivation. Let's get some extra bodies in the seats and sell some more tickets, and woohoo, we make more money. But in reality, after that meeting, well, everything kind of changed. My next year's, well, I tried to get the money before my next budget cycle, just didn't work. My next budget cycle, it became a priority to me to get the loop installed. I actually went to the rest of my tech team and I said, I don't care what your ideas for the next season are, we're not doing it. We're doing the loop. So we actually delayed our 5-year plan by a year, well, about a half a year, because we did have enough to do some of it. But we made it a priority, we installed the loop, and once the loop was installed, the amount of positive feedback was staggering. I got an email from Olive that was so heartfelt that I was damn near bawling reading the email. Like, holy crap. So this email came through and I brought it to the board, and I'm reading this email to the board and I could barely keep my freaking voice steady. So it's like, okay, that's the level of response that I got. And I'm sitting there going, wow, okay. And then next thing I know, I start getting this information coming around, and the following year, oh, by the way, you're nominated for a mayor's award. What? And then we got it. So, okay. So I didn't have any clue how big of an impact this would actually have on people, and obviously I didn't go for it for any awards, but the simple fact is that the response and the level of satisfaction from people who are actually using it, which includes our own members, is amazing. I actually had one member bring her mom, who hadn't come to a Walterdale show in as much, I don't remember the exact amount of time, but in the area of 10 years, because she couldn't hear the shows anymore. And because she couldn't hear the shows anymore, or if she had her hearing aids on, she'd turn them up and all she'd hear is candy wrappers or sniffling. She couldn't actually hear the shows. She came and saw the show after we looped. She came up to me afterwards, gave me a hug, and was like amazingly full of gratitude, and I'm like, holy cow. So I've been pretty significantly blown away by how much positive feedback I've gotten about it. As a result, I've taken the stance of, if anyone wants to see it, although all you'll see is wire and some amplifiers and a microphone, well, 3 mics, basically you're welcome to come over and I'll show it to you and talk about the various advantages. One of the advantages that a lot of people who are doing the FM type systems don't realize that the T-coil has on them, T-coil has a higher upfront cost, but how about next year when you have to replace a belt pack because, sorry, I watched you, an audience member is fumbling around with a belt pack and they drop it. Now you've got a destroyed belt pack, you got to replace it. The only people who touch our equipment is our technicians. We know, well, we claim we know what we're doing. Basically, we take care of our own equipment. The same equipment that you'd also have in an FM system is also in the T-coil system. Your mics, your mixers, your amplifiers, except for their different types of amplifiers, except for you don't have the belt packs. We do have 2 belt packs for those persons with hearing loss that don't have hearing aids, so we can certainly support them, but we only have 2, and they very seldom go out. The cool part is that when people show up, I get the emails and I get the thank yous, but I don't actually know who's using the system. So even if someone asks me, well, how many people are using it? I can't tell you. However, I can tell you that it is being used because I am getting the responses. And it's actually really cool to see those responses.
As it was explained, I work for the City of Edmonton. I am essentially, in simple terms, I'm a building inspector. So most of the building inspection that occurs on any big building where you would have a situation with rooms such as this one here that may have a loop system installed, most of that building inspection, believe it or not, actually occurs on a desk before a building permit is issued. We can't see anything there. It's really not anything they draw on any drawing. It may be mentioned in some specification book deep down in the volumes. And then on the inspection side, after a building is built, we again can't see very much. A lot of the equipment, fine equipment such as this microphone, wouldn't even be in the building when we're there. So a lot of it is really comes down to a trust that the professionals that are involved in the design and construction of the building, that's the architect, electrical engineers, and the others, are actually carrying out what's on the plan. As I say, it's very hard to verify that kind of thing. From our perspective, and with a talk like this, such as Juliette has demonstrated, it's kind of apparent, like, why wouldn't you have this everywhere? Why wouldn't you have it everywhere? Why isn't it just happening? Why are we having this conversation? Bear in mind, from a construction point of view, for new buildings, there are actually 5 aspects to the building code. There's building safety itself, there's the structural safety, you don't want it rolling down, fire safety, there's energy efficiency, and then there's accessibility. Not in any particular order, except I think that somehow things sort themselves out as being, let's not have it fall down or burn up before we start thinking about things we can't even really see. So in that, and I think this is a pretty good graphical demonstration, this is 1/2 of the building code for Alberta. And if I start flipping through it, and I work my way through, the accessibility bit comes down in here somewhere, and then if I look beyond in that for assistive listening devices, there are 2 sentences in this entire volume, of which is one of 2 volumes. Where this stands in the awareness of the greater world is clearly not very high. It's clearly not high in designers' minds. It is our task, has been brought to our attention from the earlier session, it is our task to raise the question at plans exam or on an inspection. And most of the time I believe we do, and it's our job to do it. And in that, I could say that if you are in a new building and you or your customers, because we have a lot of hearing professionals here, say, well, I don't know how to use this, I've never experienced it, I don't see the little blue ear with the T on it, that kind of thing. There's nothing wrong with bringing those questions back to our office in a new building. We do not apply this code to existing buildings. That's Leslie's group's job or task or their pleasure, in fact. But for new construction, we certainly would. That's really all I can say about this, is there's a provision there for some kind of assisted listening devices. I think the evidence appears to point that looping is the best solution, but our code allows that any device, such as the FM or IR, is acceptable as well. We find many designers want to put the least amount of money into it, and they think somehow that the FM system is going to be portable or more useful or somehow just a better solution. We try to the extent we can, but bear in mind that at construction time, this book represents a construction minimum. Does not represent the best or best practice. It's an absolute minimum. Really, the only way we can have this, to have feedback from people, If they're in a place and we're finding that the system isn't activated, they don't complete by putting in the rest of the equipment, there may be a wire, but not the rest of the equipment, or then down the line, when maintenance is not carried out, system breaks down, or they change out parts and are unaware, or make a choice. And it's always been a problem with maintenance because this is a building code, not a maintenance code, but our office will still deal with it to the best extent we can. Okay, so that's about all I can say from the building code point of view, but Leslie's group with the accessibility committee takes the whole thing one step further to fulfill aspirations that the city organization here has, so I'll let her speak to that.
Okay, I'm certainly not Heather, but but I've been around long enough. So I do work with the Accessibility Advisory Committee and with the City of Edmonton, and there are 15 volunteers that are appointed annually by City Council, and they are very knowledgeable when it comes to disabilities. A lot of them have disabilities themselves. When a lot of people look at accessibility or you hear accessibility, it's always, or the older version, or a lot of people still look at it thinking physical accessibility, and it's not just physical. But, and kudos to Richard and his group, because they actually, I remember them contacting the office, emailing me 2 or 3 or 4 times, asking questions about not necessarily the loop system, but you know, accessibility and bringing their theater up to date. So, and kudos to CHHA as well, because they helped them out a lot. You know, one of the events that we do with the Accessibility Advisory Committee is the annual Mayor's Award. So they were nominated, Walterdale Theatre was nominated for a Mayor's Award in accessible architecture sort of thing, or accessible homes and buildings, and they did end up winning it. So there is funding when it comes to, we get questions all of the time on, you know, provincial things, city things, but with the Alberta Building Code, it's so old. It's a big document. There is very little on assisted listening devices, and you know, we have actually, Heather and I's colleagues are with the seniors group as well, so there is a lot of aging in place, a lot of seniors, a lot of kids that do have hearing problems. And I know that you were talking earlier about the FM system, and I remember my oldest daughter, who is 31 now, when she was in kindergarten, we had Darcy, who was deaf, and they brought in the FM system, but even the kids couldn't, there was always problems with it, and the parent association spent a lot of money, you know, putting those in too, and the feedback from this loop system is just tremendous, and kudos to you for coming here and spreading that. And like you said, if you hit one person, 2 person, or you know, if one group put it in their office and others heard about it, it's just going to be a domino effect. The city does get accessibility funding. It's a certain amount each year, and I don't think it's changed in like forever, for city-owned and occupied buildings where they can do any retrofitting, but I believe it's still at like $230,000 a year, which really isn't a lot for, you know, a lot of the buildings that need to be retrofitted.
One other thing, just real quick, is that also when you're looping an area or a building, in our case, we looped our auditorium due to an electromagnetic interference issue that we had because our dimmer racks are on the one side of the auditorium. We could only loop half of the auditorium. So even places like Rogers Place or other facilities like that, looping an entire facility isn't necessarily an option, nor is it a requirement. By looping half of our audience and our box office, but by looping just half of our audience, we now serve between 75 and 90 people, because there is some overspill. By even just taking that little bite out of it, we made a lot of people happy. Even if you're a facility that someone's wanting to loop doesn't support installing it because of whatever reason, maybe the flooring or whatever, if they can loop even just a small part and reserve that small part, or do something to ensure that that small part is accessible to the people with the hearing loss, that will go a long way.
Okay, so we will open this up to questions, but I just wanted to encourage you to consider even the counter loop system at your places so that your clientele can try it, can use it. But in the meantime, if you don't have one, Our CHHA-ED office has one. We are looped in our office. People are welcome to come and try it and use the system right there. They can do that in the least. Plus, it gets them to know what CHHA is. So there's always that option. But any questions from the people here?
How quickly did the number of users who have T-coil-enabled hearing aids build once there were more loops available?
So in my practice, about 90% of my patients had T-coils. I was a big Widex user, and these were the Widex Diva and Inteo days, for those of you who are familiar with the different models and makes. There were practices like Beltone and Avada, where that percentage was significantly lower, but the word got out pretty fast among the audiology community, a little bit less so with Miracle Ear, like I said, and Avada and Beltone. But that's one of the reasons why I handed out those survey cards, because I wanted my competition to see that this was not about me getting my foot in the door in places. This was about helping their patients hear. I'm going to say it was probably about 3 years that I heard from the Resound rep. He said, you know, the first question I get when I come and introduce a new hearing aid in Northeast Wisconsin, audiologists want to know, does it have a T-coil? I cannot sell hearing aids here without T-coils anymore. So that word did get out pretty quickly. A second story, and this happened in a restaurant. This woman comes into my office for a different reason, and she said, you know, I was in a restaurant, and John so-and-so was here. And I'm going, yeah, I know him. And Mike so-and-so was here. Yeah, I know him too. And then they were around the dinner table talking about telecoils. Now, how many of your patients talk about telecoils? They don't, right? So then this other guy walks in and says, well, you know, he has trouble hearing in this one place. And they both turn to him and say, well, you know, you need a hearing aid with one of those T-coil thingies, otherwise you can't hear. And it's amazing. And this woman looks at me and says, you know, it almost makes me want to go out and buy a hearing aid. And I'm going, yeah? Because they were praising this so much. My advantage, of course, was that I was an old audiologist in a community. Lots of people knew me. I've been very vocal, active in the schools, active in the church, all these different places. But you are the same way, and you know your mover and shaker patients. And I thought, who's going to pay for all of this, right? My patients did. They stepped forward and paid for loops. I mean, they spent $6,000 on hearing aids. They still can't hear in church. Another $6,000 isn't, I mean, there's a lot of people with a lot of money out there. Money is not the issue, and you can nudge them forward. I didn't know I could do that, but you can. They will believe you after you've sent them to a church that has a loop. I don't know if that totally answered your question, but it is a process. The hearing industry is responding. Have you seen the apps that have, on the Resound app, you can on the fly switch M and T mixing with your phone app. So that's very cool. So during the sermon you can go to T only, and then when the singing starts you can go back to MT so you can hear your own voice, which is important for people with occluding ear molds. Resound, the wireless mic, has a T-coil. There was an Oticon lady using Oticon streamer. The new streamer, the Pro, has a T-coil built in. So the industry is responding. And they basically, you know, for the longest time, they didn't want to look at me at AAA because, you know, I'm the hearing loop lady and the T-coil lady, but they are responding.
At CHHA and all across CHHA, national, we're a national organization, branches everywhere. We are pushing and teaching our members to speak up and ask for it and demand it. So it is going to come. They're going to start getting on board.
If you tell your patient, and you show 2 hearing aids, which hearing aid do you want? We're going to point to the smaller one, right? They want a hearing aid that's small. You're asking the wrong question. Where do you not want to hear? Do you not want to hear at the theater? You not want to hear at church? What if you travel and you go to the UK, right? Or you go to Sweden and you take tours in looped buses? If you don't have a T-coil in your hearing aid, you're going to be missing out. And if you pose it that way and you say, this one you can hear face-to-face, one-on-one, 6 feet away, but with this one you can hear in every loop, and here's an app that shows where all the loops are located. I'm working with Google, by the way, Google Maps, to get hearing loops on the map for accessibility. That is such a cool thing, right? So you walk into a facility and your app goes, ding dong, there's a hearing loop here. That's cool. But you need to give your patient the means to hear there. And if you ask them, where do you not want to hear? They will speak up. But we're asking them the wrong questions. We are hiding hearing aids. And as audiologists, we should be all about hearing better, hearing everywhere.
I'm wondering why schools have not been mentioned. I'm not an audiologist, I'm a speech-language pathologist, and so I help train young people who are going into schools. And I was surprised that I didn't hear you mention schools. What's the difference?
Sizes of rooms, that's right. That's what it comes down to. We didn't actually read what was in there, but what that code passage indicates is that some sort of assisted listening device system is required only in spaces where people group together that are larger than 100 square meters, which is about 1,100, 1,200 square feet. That exceeds the size of most classrooms. So now you're left with the gymnasium and possibly a big lunchroom or some kind of common space or maybe a library. Those areas are supposed to be provided with something. I believe that you would probably find one of the other systems, not a loop, all packed up on a cart, in a storage room somewhere with no one with any idea how it's to be used. And the next year they can't find it, and the year after that it goes out the back door because, they like the cart.
We have been successful in high school auditoriums that are used as small performing arts centers in communities like Watoma and Kakana and Ripon. When I heard of a middle school auditorium getting remodeled, I called the principal. And he said, we never considered this. So then I spoke to the committee and they said, well, this is a good idea. The school, they could donate $5,000 or $6,000 with an ADA grant. So the school system in the US budgets ADA money, accessibility money every year. And if it doesn't get used, it rolls over to the next year. So then we did a small fundraiser in the community and the parents stepped forward and a couple of well-heeled people said, well, we need a loop at Webster Stanley. And sure enough, when the auditorium got revamped and all the chairs were out, they put a loop in the floor. And the loop was 11,500, and it was installed with grout. They cut a groove in the floor, put the wire in, and covered it over its cement floor, and then they put the chairs back in. Of course, it's easier, the more loops there are, it's easier to justify. Sometimes it's leadership. It's one person who, I've been to building meetings, the University of Wisconsin. What are you doing for people who are hard of hearing? Oh, and they kind of looked at each other like, oh, we haven't considered that. They opened that new academic building with 5 loops. And that was because I spoke up. So so you can be that person. And if you don't know how, you email me. I have all kinds of materials.
If any of you have anything further?
One thing to note is that the momentum has started in Edmonton. That's the nice part. The City Hall, number of city buildings, as well as some of you may not realize, the Citadel now has, the McLab is looped. The Fringe Theatre Adventures are now looking at looping all of their spaces. During the Fringe, they often put temporary loops in a couple of their spaces. It's not just me anymore. It's now starting to happen everywhere. So you either get on the wave or you're behind it.
My mom is 85 and she's deaf in one ear and very hard of hearing in the other. And, just an example, like I look at all this passion and when my mother can hear, it's wonderful. And when she can't, she wants to cry, like it's just very frustrating and it makes myself as her daughter, I want to cry myself, you know. She had lost her hearing aid the one day and, you know, was gone for how long? And I said, Mom, let's just get you another one. It hasn't been that long. No, I don't want to spend the money. I said, you know, Mom, is it quality of life or quantity of life? Like, you've got a good teacher's pension. It's not like you can't afford it. Like, this is your life. Do you not want to go through? So, and I don't see anybody selling anything here, and that's what I really, you know, commend CHHA and everybody here for being here. It's quality of life for everyone, for our parents, for us someday. I know that, you know, someday when I retire, and I know that I will be hard of hearing or deaf. No, seriously.
We have a lot of rights.
Exactly. My grandpa was the same way, my mom. I'm not so worried because I feel that this is happening and going to be much better for my generation of older people than it is, you know, for a lot of them now, so.
On behalf of CHHA-Edmonton, I would like to thank the people who participated, our speakers. Thank you very, very much for spending the day with us. For those of you who came, and for the Rick Hansen Foundation and Shauna for staying all afternoon with us as well. Thank you so much. Well, thank you, Lee, for dreaming up this scheme. I just want to remind you there's a bunch of CHHA information up the back you can take. Membership, you don't have to have a hearing loss to be a member. Many people don't know that. You can be a hearing member. We need hearing members. We need hearing board members. And have a good evening.